This is a KCCI Commitment 2022 special presentation, Iowa Attorney General Debate.
And good afternoon, and thanks for joining us on KCCI 8 News Commitment 2022 special, the Iowa Attorney General Debate. I'm James Stratton.
And I'm Amanda Rooker. Thanks for joining us. Over the next hour, we'll be questioning these two candidates about issues central to holding the Attorney General's office. But before we do, here's what the Attorney General does.
The Attorney General is the state's top legal officer who's in charge of Iowa's legal business. The AG gives legal advice and representation to most state agencies and departments.
Now, the Attorney General also represents the state in administrative law and all levels of the courts, from Iowa District Court all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And Attorney General is elected every 4 years. Now, we'll introduce you to the candidates.
Republican Brenna Bird is currently the Guthrie County Attorney. She's held that office since 2018. Bird has also served as counsel to former Governor Terry Branstad. She's a graduate of Drake University and the University of Chicago Law School.
Democrat Tom Miller is the current Iowa Attorney General. This is his 10th four-year term in office. Miller has been Attorney General since 1978, except for a 4-year stint in private practice. He's a graduate of Loras College and the Harvard Law School.
Now, here are some of the guidelines that we will follow in today's hour-long debate. Candidates will have 60 seconds to answer each question. If the candidate's opponent mentions them by name, they will have a 30-second rebuttal period to respond.
And moderators may interrupt a candidate if they drift off topic or have gone over time. Now, all decisions made by moderators will be final. Candidates will have the opportunity to ask their opponent one question, and the candidates will each get 60 seconds at the end of debate for closing statements.
And in the effort of fairness, we drew names out of a hat beforehand to determine the order of questioning. Our first question goes to Mr. Tom Miller. Tom, the first question is, how do you view the role of the Iowa Attorney General?
Well, the Iowa Attorney General's office is just this, in a way, wonderful job, in the sense that we use the law to serve the interest of ordinary Iowans and have just a variety of responsibilities. There's never a boring day in the Attorney General's office. And also, I think it's really important that the Attorney General be independent and call things like how he sees them, particularly interpreting the law. That independence role is just important. And in terms of using the law to serve ordinary Iowans, you know, we do that every day and enjoy it and flourish in it, I believe. Consumer protection is an example. We have the best consumer protection division in the country. Protecting people in terms of their lives and safety, our area prosecution unit does some of the most difficult criminal cases throughout the state. Scott Brown has been very successful there. We fought against the opioid situation and are getting $225 million back to Iowans. And we're working hard for farmers with this enormous increase in fertilizer price. So that's my view of the office, using the law to serve ordinary Iowans and being independent, an independent Attorney General.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bird, the same question to you, 60 seconds. How do you view the role of AG?
Well, the role of the Attorney General is also to serve as Iowa's top law enforcement official, and that's something that I will bring to the office. I've been county attorney in 3 counties, and currently I'm the Guthrie County Attorney. I'm a prosecutor. I work with law enforcement and victims of crime every day, and I'm regularly in court and trying criminal cases. When I'm Attorney General, we will back the blue. We will work with law enforcement. What I've heard on the campaign trail is most law enforcement have never met the Attorney General. He's essentially retired on the job. When I'm Attorney General, we'll do some things differently. We'll work with law enforcement in all 99 counties. We'll have a cold case unit so that no one gets away with murder. We'll also have a special victims team that focuses on cases involving children where they're victims of sexual abuse and the elderly who can be sexually abused in our nursing homes. We will always stand up for what's right under the laws and Constitution.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now, Mrs. Bird, this question is for you.
I was mentioned there.
You weren't mentioned
not by name, sir.
By name, well, but you know, virtually, you know, don't I get a chance to respond?
Quickly.
Retired on the job. Nothing could be more ridiculous or stupid. I'm active, I'm aggressive. I work with our staff. I get into priorities. I'm the president of the National Association of Attorney Generals at a crucial time, and doing that on top of my regular job. Retired on the job, Brenna, nothing could be more ridiculous than that.
Some rebuttal to you, ma'am, because he mentioned you by name.
Well, that's just not true, because as of today, 72 out of 99 sheriffs are supporting me. And consistently, when I'm campaigning in all 99 counties, they say they haven't seen you. They haven't even met you. You're not doing the job you used to do. You've retired on the job.
moving on.
That's
Moving
just
on.
Thank you. Let's move on.
totally false.
To the next topic and talking about if either of you are elected, we'll start with you, Mrs. Byrd. What are the top items on your agenda?
Well, first of all, when I'm Attorney General, we will support law enforcement and back the blue. We will also always be thinking about how we can serve victims of crime and how we can keep Iowa safe. We'll have a unit to make sure that we're taking care of those cold cases and leaving no stone unturned. And we'll also have a special focus on the crimes that affect a lot of people very seriously. And here I'm talking about children who are sexually abused and the elderly who are abused as well. They need our support, and we need to lock up the people who do those things so they can't hurt anyone else. I will also always be in all of our 99 counties every year to make sure that I never lose touch with what people need in Iowa. Another thing I'll do differently is I will hold the Biden administration accountable when they overstep. When they go beyond the law and the Constitution, I will take them to court, unlike the current Attorney General.
Thank you, Mrs. Byrd. Now, this question is for Mr. Miller. You've been in this position for roughly 40 years. What's left for you to accomplish?
Well, I think we have a really significant unfinished agenda, and let me talk about that, and that's what drives me to run in for another term. One is in the area of opioids. We're in the process of recovering $225 million for Iowa in that area, but what we want to do is really make effective use of that in two areas. One is in prevention, cutting down the prescriptions, and the other is in treatment. Particularly medicine-assisted treatment. We have unfinished business in the area of high tech. I'm one of the leaders on the executive committee of the case against Google on antitrust grounds. I want to see that through. And we're just but a lot of work yet to do with kids and the media, Facebook, TikTok. We're just getting started on that. I want to see that through. And also in terms of my agenda for when I was president of the Attorney General's Association this year, we've developed new issues and new challenges in the consumer area. So there's just so much left to be done. That's what motivates me.
Thank you, sir. President Biden just announced he will pardon thousands of Americans convicted of simple possession of marijuana under federal law. He also wants governors to do the same for people convicted of state marijuana offenses. This question to you, Mr. Miller, as Attorney General, how would you advise the governor in that situation?
Well, we've done some work on this area, and that is to try and change the law so that for possession of marijuana, people do not go to the penitentiary and not to go to jail, that they're not in prison. That's sort of been our initiative. We've worked with the Senate, got a bill passed through the Senate, but not the House. The idea of pardons in this area, that's something maybe the governor should consider. And maybe in a selective area, there is some real downsides if you have a conviction for possession in employment, education, and insurance. I think additionally the governor should consider pardons in the area of opioids, particularly those people that went in for surgery and got a prescription for 30 days and had no idea of the risk that they were taking, and get addicted in 10 or 12 days, and then have a whole series of events around that. I think she should give some consideration to pardons in that area because of the injustice, the challenge.
You, 60 seconds there. Thank you, sir. Mrs. Byrd, your same question regarding simple possession of marijuana at the state level.
Yeah, well, the question of whether someone should be pardoned or not, that's up to the president when it's federal, and that's up to the governor when it's a state issue. What I will say as a prosecutor, I see the devastation that drugs brings to Iowa. And particularly in our rural communities, we are seeing a ruralization of drugs where it is coming out of the big cities into the countryside. And it is devastating. Many of our crimes are related to drugs and those who are burglarizing and seeking funds for drugs. You know, the current Attorney General, he talks about the opioid lawsuit, but what he doesn't talk about is the drugs coming across the southern border. Methamphetamine and fentanyl are coming across our southern border. And I would call upon President Biden to secure the border, to stop the flow of illegal drugs. Many young people become addicted. Meth is a horrible drug, and fentanyl, just one dose can kill someone. As Attorney General, I will work hard against drugs.
Well, Governor Kim Reynolds has said publicly that she wants what she calls her own attorney general. What's your reaction to that comment? Mrs. Byrd, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I think what the governor is saying there is she wants an attorney general who will do the job, unlike our current attorney general. I appreciate Governor Reynolds' support, and when I'm attorney general, I will defend our laws and I will work hard for Iowa.
Mr. Miller, you have 60 seconds as well.
Well, you know, I said it in the beginning and I'll say it again. It is so important that the Attorney General be independent. The Attorney General not be under the control or direction of any individual or any political party or any ideology. And that's been a center point of my career. I've been independent. I call them as I see them. Doesn't matter what the political circumstances are. And that's really important. And in terms of relationship with the governor, it's important that the Attorney General has some independence, because sometimes has to tell the governor the bad news, that she can't do certain things. That whole concept of an independent Attorney General, extremely important, and I live it every day.
A good follow-up question here, Mr. Miller, and it was actually on our agenda. You have also said that politics should not play a role in the Attorney General's office. You've declined to represent the state on a couple of cases. In what instances is it okay to withdraw your name from the state's position?
Yeah, you know, we have a primary responsibility of representing the state whenever the state is in court, and I take that very seriously. Over 40 years, there's been 2 occasions when, for, I believe, ethical reasons, I declined to represent the state. Because first and foremost, you have to do the right thing. You have to be independent. You have to be ethical. In both cases, the AFSCME case and the abortion case, there were ethical concerns so that I felt I shouldn't go forward, that I couldn't zealously represent the state on one and both of those issues. So the ethical concerns are just really important and are part of our duties, and rolled into this whole situation of being independent and doing the right thing. And again, it was twice in 40 years.
Mrs. Byrd, you have also said politics should not play a role in the Attorney General's office. In your opinion, in what instances is it okay to withdraw from cases and not defend the state's position? 60 seconds to you as well.
Well, that's not any different than the job I do as Guthrie County Attorney. I prosecute cases, and I certainly don't know the politics of the criminal defendants that I prosecute, and it wouldn't matter if I did. Politics does not play a role there. And you know, what we're talking about here is not necessarily whether our current Attorney General is independent or not, it's whether he's even there. He's been absent, not doing the work that needs to be done far more times than the ones he's admitted to. Whether it was the COVID vaccine mandate that would have forced people to get a shot, whether it's the student loan bailout or Waters of the U.S. regulations that would hurt farmers, he has been absent, not doing his job, taking his name off of the lawsuits. When I'm Attorney General, I will do the job, I will enforce the laws, I will defend the laws, and I will uphold our Constitution.
Mr. Miller named you twice there, at least in title. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, certainly. Absent is just a wrong word. I did my duty. I did not think we should file those cases against the Biden administration. I didn't think that was the thing we should do. I didn't think the cases should have been brought. I wasn't absent. I was very much there, making an independent, considered legal opinion based on competence of myself and my staff.
Now, Mr. Miller, following up on the idea of being independent, in 2019, you did agree to seek Governor Reynolds' approval in joining multi-state lawsuits. She has blocked nearly 2/3 of the lawsuits that the Attorney General's office has wanted to join. How is that any different from the governor having her own Attorney General? Mrs. Byrd, we'll start with you.
Yes, well, I think that's very different. Here, Attorney General Miller went too far, and the legislature took away some of the responsibilities of the Attorney General's office and put a check and balance on that. Governor Reynolds did veto that legislation after the Attorney General agreed that he would seek her permission before he would sign on to any state lawsuits or national lawsuits. That's hardly independence. That happened because of the problems that were there. When I'm Attorney General, I will do the job, I will do the work. I will defend the state of Iowa and do what's in the best interest of Iowa. Politics has no role in it. And in fact, of the 72 current sheriffs, some of those sheriffs are Democrats as well, because they want an Attorney General who will work hard and who will do the job.
Mr. Miller, you have 60 seconds. What's your response?
Well, first of all, it doesn't involve multi-states. It's the lawsuits, for instance, against the president and sort of political and ideological lawsuits. The multi-states where we've been so successful to bring back millions of dollars to Iowans are not affected by this agreement or by the legislation. Indeed, the legislature wanted to make sure that that didn't happen so I could continue to bring all this money back to the state. You know, it happened because I was active. I did file some lawsuits against President Trump as I thought I should. Again, my independence, my independent judgment. That was a pushback from that. Had an agreement with the governor, and the governor has vetoed a number of cases that would have been involved against the Trump administration and others. And according to the agreement, has the right to do that. But the whole thing is that these lawsuits are don't go to the essence of the Attorney General's office. They're ideological to some extent, political to some extent. Other states carry the ball. They're not what Attorney General's office is about. It's about the things I talk about often in terms of using the law to serve the interest of ordinary Iowans.
Switching gears a little bit now, the overturning of Roe v. Wade at the U.S. Supreme Court level has thrust the issue of abortion access to the forefront across the country and, of course, right here in Iowa. We want to address the candidates now, what your personal stances are on abortion and how it would impact your work as Attorney General. I believe that question goes to you first, Mr. Miller.
Well, first of all, I think it was a terrible mistake for the Supreme Court to reverse Roe. You know, Roe is a middle ground, had a set of compromises where the abortion was restricted but not eliminated. And I believe that women should essentially make this choice, that they should have the freedom from government intervention to make this decision with their family, if necessary, and of course with the doctor. So, you know, I believe that the state should not restrict in any significant way that woman's right to choose. In the last semester, reasonable regulations do make sense, but I think it's just really important to understand, you know, what women are going through, or at least try to, from my point of view. A significant majority of Americans did not approve of the Roe reversal. Significant number of Iowans, and I agree with them.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Byrd, same question to you. Your personal stance on abortion, how would it impact your work as AG?
Well, I am pro-life, and I will defend the laws that are passed by the legislature. The legislature makes the laws. I would defend them. Unlike the current occupant of the office, who when he first came into office in 1978 was pro-life, but then changed his position in 1994 and became pro-choice. Then in 2018, he refused to defend the state's heartbeat law. Fast forward 3 years later to 2021, and he decided he would defend an abortion law the legislature had passed on the waiting period, defended that all the way up through the state Supreme Court, where that Supreme Court decided that the Iowa Constitution did not have a right to an abortion, and then partway through that case decided he would no longer represent the state in that case. So the current Attorney General, he's been on both sides of that issue, depending on where he perceives to be his personal political convenience at that time.
Again, twice by title, so we're going to go with it. 30 seconds to you, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, absolutely false. The abortion is a difficult issue for all of us on a personal level and also in terms of government policy. I was pro-life for a period of time, and then when I was out of office, thought about the issue some more and went to a pro-choice position because I thought that was the right position. Mainly because of the necessity to have freedom for women to make this decision and keep the state out of this very difficult situation. Over a course of a period of career, you do change your mind from time to time, and this was the case.
Thank you, sir.
Well, for some more context on some of those cases you just heard about, Governor Reynolds has asked the state Supreme Court to reconsider the 24-hour abortion waiting period and what's been called the fetal heartbeat law, as you mentioned. Now, the 24-hour waiting period was already appealed. The governor has asked that an injunction be lifted on the fetal heartbeat law, which would ban abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy. What's your stance on the fetal heartbeat law? Mrs. Byrd, we'll start with you.
Yes, well, the job of the Attorney General is to defend our laws when they are challenged in court. The laws are made by the legislature, the Attorney General defends them, and that's what I would do. I would defend the law that the legislature passed.
Mr. Miller, any follow-up on your thoughts on the fetal heartbeat law?
Yes. That is the case that I decided that ethically I couldn't perform. I couldn't zealously pursue that argument because of the strong convictions I have about abortion. So that is one of the two cases that I decided for ethical reasons I shouldn't be involved, and you know, on a policy matter, I think it's far too restrictive on women and their ability to function free in our state.
The number of Iowans dying from drug overdoses keeps rising in our state. Last year, 471 people lost their lives, according to the state health department. As the role of Attorney General, what is the role in preventing overdoses and keeping dangerous drugs out of Iowans' hands? That question goes to you, Mr. Miller. 60 seconds.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is a huge priority for me and for my office because of the enormous harm of addiction and including death, but also a great deal of suffering from the individual and from the whole family. So we've sued the pharmacy companies, Purdue Pharma and the others, the opioid companies. We've investigated them, we've negotiated with them, and now we have this incredible settlement with them that we'll get $225 million to try and rectify the problem and try and help victims. And one of the things that we're doing is in the area of prevention. That is that working with doctors that have a new system where the number of opioids prescribed is just really reduced. We're funding a program on that. And then the other thing is that medical assisted treatment. The whole idea of treatment is a huge answer. So get medicine assisted treatment, working with two just spectacular doctors at the University of Iowa hospitals, and working with a lot of the stakeholders and law enforcement, just trying to have a comprehensive approach to dealing with this issue, particularly around treatment and prevention.
All right, thank you for your answer. Mrs. Byrd, same question to you, 60 seconds. The role of the Attorney General's office in keeping dangerous drugs out of Iowans' hands.
Yeah. Well, that's an issue that is near and dear to my heart because as a prosecutor, I see what drugs are doing to Iowans. Many lives are ruined by drug addiction and some of the mental health problems that go right along with that. And as a prosecutor, I have prosecuted drug dealers. I don't think our current Attorney General has ever prosecuted a criminal case, much less a drug dealing case. But that's something that I will bring with me to the Attorney General's office. I also know that most of the illegal drugs, like the fentanyl, the methamphetamine, they are coming across our unsecured southern border. And if I were Attorney General, I'd call upon the Biden administration to secure our southern border and stop the flow of illegal drugs that are devastating Iowa and hurting Iowans. You know, young people are hurt by these drugs. As Attorney General, I will never forget that. I will work with our law enforcement across the state to stop illegal drugs in Iowa.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Miller, not going to let you respond to that. Only mentioned you once by title, but we are staying on that topic. So the next question stays on that topic.
Well, fair enough.
On the topic of drugs, the majority of Iowa's drug overdose deaths can be blamed on opioids. What role does the Attorney General's office play specifically in stopping deaths caused by opioids? Mrs. Byrd, you have 60 seconds.
I think one important role would be that of public education to make sure that people understand that opioids, like the illegal fentanyl we see all over Iowa, that is a dangerous drug. And if you know someone, whether a friend or family member who is abusing opioids, get them help right away because the next time they use, it could kill them. It is just that serious. The other thing that I would do is work with law enforcement so we have the resources we need across county lines to stop the drug dealers. Many opioid dealers are targeting our young people. Sometimes opioids are mixed in with other drugs, such as marijuana or methamphetamine, to change the formulation there and make them more attractive. Making sure that we are always keeping an eye on what's going on and holding those drug dealers accountable. That's what we have to do. We must stop the flow of illegal drugs and we must lock up the drug dealers.
Mr. Miller, now 60 seconds to you. What is your role and as Attorney General, your office in stopping deaths caused by opioids?
Well, what we've tried to do in our office on particularly on fentanyl, but opioids in general, is be sort of the coordinator of law enforcement, the medical community, and drug treatment people, and we've called people together. We've done things with the doctors. We had public statements. We've done things with law enforcement. And fentanyl is just so devastating, so dangerous. Just a small amount of fentanyl can kill someone. And what happens is that the drug dealers, the manufacturers down in Mexico, are mixing fentanyl in with other products because fentanyl is cheaper. They're mixing it in with meth, with coke, with opioid type pills. And people are taking them that have no idea they're taking fentanyl. They're not used to fentanyl, and fentanyl is so dramatically powerful, people die. The increase in deaths in Iowa and the country are dramatically because of fentanyl. So we're working with the law enforcement community, we're working with the public, we're working with the press to try and tell people about this. Particularly recently,
that is time. Thank you.
Right. I could go on for a long time.
And we still have 30 more minutes, a perfect segue. When we come back, we'll shake it up a little bit, giving the candidates the chance to ask each other a question.
And you are watching a KCCI 8 News Commitment 2022 special, the Iowa Attorney General's debate. We'll be back in 90 seconds.
This is a KCCI Commitment 2022 special presentation, Iowa Attorney General Debate.
Welcome back. Thanks for watching. So far, we, the moderators, have been asking all the questions, but now it's the candidates' turn to ask their opponent one question. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer. And we begin with Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, you may now ask Mrs. Byrd a question.
Yeah. You know, Brenna, you worked for at least 7 years, maybe as long as 9, for Steve King on his congressional staff. He gave you your first real big start. He was your mentor among others. You were his chief of staff. You know, looking back, what would you say about his career, good and bad, and of the things the major issues with him, which do you agree with and which do you disagree with?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting that you're asking me the same question at a debate that you asked at a debate we had 12 years ago. You asked the same question back then. Nothing has changed. I worked in Congress over 19 years ago, and I was chief of staff and legal counsel, supervising the DC staff and the 5 district offices, serving Western Iowa. But that was a job I had 19 years ago, and you're still asking about it because you want to distract from the things that you haven't done in your office. You know, you haven't tried criminal cases yourself. You haven't gone out and gotten the support of law enforcement all over the state, Republicans and Democrats. In fact, I'm hearing you haven't left Des Moines very much. You have retired on the job. You don't want to talk about the sexually violent predator that you let out on the streets. You have retired on the job. You're just not doing the job anymore.
Mr. Miller, you have 30 seconds for a response there.
You know, that's just that I retired on the job is just as ridiculous as it was before. You know, I love this job. I'm very active in the job. I take priorities. I've worked this opioid case as the leader of our state. I'm energized by consumer protection. I've had 2 jobs. I've been Attorney General of Iowa and President of the National Association of Attorney Generals at a very difficult time where I worked endlessly with others. The idea that I'm retired on the job is insulting, but it's even more so ridiculous. I love this job. I'm very active and have been very successful in the job.
Now, Mrs. Byrd, you may now ask a question to Mr. Miller.
Well, I don't doubt that you love the job. I could see that, but I do think you retired on the job. That's what I'm hearing from Iowans when I'm out working in the 99 counties. So let me ask you this question. Tell me what case or cases you have tried in court yourself. Have you ever tried a criminal jury trial yourself?
Well, what I've done over a long period of time is had a rich experience in the practice of law. I've worked in legal services in Baltimore and had all of those, you know, challenging cases that legal services had. I had a private practice in McGregor where I tried cases. I didn't prosecute. I defended cases there. And then I had a very active practice at Faegre and Benson, one of the best law firms in the country, dealing with myriad cases. And also, you know, I've been Attorney General for 40 years, and I've had just a rich experience in handling and supervising cases and making decisions, and always have built on that experience. So that's just I've been very fortunate to have just a very rich legal career where I've learned and I've had experience, and am out talking to Iowans constantly and have a sense over 40 years of what Iowa thinks, particularly as it intersects with the Attorney General's office.
All right, thank you both for playing ball and asking each other questions. Appreciate that. Getting back to us answering the questions, or asking the questions rather. In 2020, we saw unprecedented challenges to our election process nationwide. Some who didn't view the legitimate winner, President Joe Biden, as such. Quickly, a yes or no answer from both of you. We'll start with Mr. Miller. Is Joe Biden the legitimate winner in 2020?
He's very legitimate. He won that race by winning the most votes and winning the electoral votes. You know, I worked a lot.
I have a follow-up question. Just
okay.
Looking for a quick yes or no.
I'll save it.
Yes or no to you, Mrs. Byrd?
Yes, I do have concerns, though, about election integrity across the United States.
Okay, that leads me perfectly to my next question. Mrs. Byrd gets this question since you went first last time, Mr. Miller. Do you believe Iowa's voting rights and systems are secure, Mrs. Byrd? 60 seconds to you.
I think, here in Iowa, we have a good system. We have good voter integrity laws. I hear, though, from Iowans all over the state that are concerned about the voter integrity laws, concerned about the possibility of cheating, and concerned about what's going on in other states that waters down the votes of Iowans when they're voting for president. And we do have some good laws here in Iowa, some important laws. For example, the voter ID law, a law that I support that my opponent does not support. But we can always look for ways to make that better, to make our process better. And know this, when I'm Attorney General, regardless of which party or candidate is accused of cheating, and if anybody would ever break our election integrity laws, I will bring them to justice.
Now the full minute, Mr. Miller. Do you believe Iowa's voting rights and systems are secure?
They're very secure, as secure as it possibly can be. You know, we're blessed with 99 county auditors who are our election officials, and they do a terrific job. And they take great pride in this. They don't want to be told what to do by parties or outside groups. They want to do it their way and do it the right way. The last election, we worked a lot with the auditors, set up a sort of a consulting group with three of them, and went back and forth and talked about the issues that were coming up and how to make the system better, and how to refute the charges that were totally false. It was a rich experience with local government officials. Those county auditors are really heroes. They provide an election result, an election system in Iowa that is clean as a hound's tooth. We could not ask for anything more, and we should not question them. And throughout the country, there are very similar people. The votes that you see election night are legitimate votes. There are no legitimate questions about the legitimacy of the election. It was legitimate. The vote count was secure. The vote count was right.
Switching gears now, on November 8th, Iowans will vote on a constitutional amendment for the right to keep and bear arms, which shall not be infringed. That will require strict scrutiny for any alleged violations of that right brought before a court. That is the highest level of scrutiny. Do you support passage of that amendment, and explain your response? Mr. Miller, you have 60 seconds.
Yeah, I'm opposed to it because of strict scrutiny. I generally favor the Second Amendment. At the federal level and the state level. The problem is the strict scrutiny. It's the highest possible level to get common sense gun law passed. And we would, if it's passed, we would face a situation where most, if not all, common sense gun laws would be declared unconstitutional because of the harsh nature of that standard. That would put Iowans at peril, and it would most of all put law enforcement people at peril if we did that. So I'm opposed to that. I think it goes too far. I'm someone that generally likes balance. There's no balance on strict scrutiny in this situation.
Thank you. Mrs. Byrd, you have 60 seconds on if you support the constitutional amendment, support its passage.
I support the Second Amendment. I support our Second Amendment rights. Unlike my opponent, who believes in gun control and got an F from the NRA, I believe we should uphold the Second Amendment here in Iowa, and I think that we should focus on the situation that needs to be focused on, which is criminals and felons who have firearms. I would increase the penalty for that. Right now, It is a D felony, the lowest level of felony in Iowa for a domestic abuser or a felon to be found in possession of firearms. We need to strengthen that. Federal law is much tougher in that regard than our state law is, and as an experienced prosecutor, I can tell you that many times judges will give someone probation for that type of crime. It doesn't even require prison. When I'm Attorney General, I'll work at focusing where we need to focus with the gun laws, not on law-abiding Iowans, but on the criminals.
Quickly, ma'am, do you support the constitutional amendment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Switching gears now, Mr. Miller, rather this goes to Mrs. Byrd. Sorry about that. A lot of Iowans receive several robocalls a day. Actually just got one right before we sat down here. So phone companies are now legally required to stop robocalls through what's called the TRACED Act. What is the Attorney General's role in making sure that those companies are exactly doing that and potentially stopping robocalls from my cell phone, your cell phone, Mr. Miller's cell phone here in the room? Mrs. Byrd, 60 seconds to you.
Well, I can tell you, we all hate those robocalls. I think that is something I hear a lot about, and I certainly don't like getting them myself. I also particularly hate the robocalls that are ripoffs, that are scams, where they are targeting people, sometimes folks who are worried that their grandkids are in jail and need to be let out and to send money right away or to mail gift cards. Big scams that need to be stopped. Robocalls are a problem. One of the problems with robocalls is that it seems like just when one area is cracked down, another area pops up. When I'm Attorney General, I will be vigilant in terms of protecting Iowans, enforcing the laws, and trying to stay one step ahead of what's going on. We have to do that, especially when people are being ripped off.
Mr. Miller, same question to you. The role of Attorney General in stopping robocalls.
Well, robocalls are the bane of the existence of citizens. They're the bane of the existence of the Attorney General's office. Extremely frustrating. We've worked a long time on these set of issues and made some progress, but want to make a lot more progress. This is one of the things I've talked about in terms of my initiatives as NAG president to do this more and try and get ahead of the system. The problem is that the robocalls are made from outside the country. That hinders law enforcement in a significant way. The phone companies really have to do more. That's sort of our plan, to try and get them to do more. I do see the warning coming up more often on my phone and don't answer it, but they really need to do more. What we're trying to do is develop ways to cut off access to phone lines for the people that do these from India and elsewhere. So there is some progress being made, but far too many calls for you and me and everybody else in Iowa.
I think that might be something we all can agree on. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Well, many Americans with student loan debt will soon be able to apply for student loan debt forgiveness through a new federal program. Iowa is one of several states suing the Biden administration over that program. Mr. Miller, we'll start with you. Is it right for Iowa to be suing over this?
Yeah. If it were my decision, I wouldn't sue over this. Student debt is just such a challenge for so many people, and including people that were scammed by for-profit colleges. And students and adults now, former students, just really struggle with this in terms of the ability to buy a house, sometimes to have kids, sometimes to get married. It's a real problem, and President Biden did a compromise here that I think was the right compromise. I think full student loan debt removal was a mistake and never supported this. This is a more modest step that will help people, and what the key to it is that it helps the people that need it the most. There's been a good analysis done that people that have the 10 to 12 to 15 to $20 million in debt, those are the ones that struggle the most to deal with this, and they're the ones that are going to be helped the most. I think that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mrs. Byrd, is it right to be suing over the Biden administration's move to forgive student loan debt?
Well, what the Biden administration did there was wrong and was not supported by the law. And I'm disappointed that our current Attorney General wouldn't sue the Biden administration. He certainly had no problems suing the Trump administration right and left when Donald Trump was president. But now that Biden's president, he hasn't sued the Biden administration. He does not hold them accountable. The president did not have the authority under the law to do that with student loans. That program would give a couple making $250,000 up to $20,000 each in student loan forgiveness. The Congress didn't authorize that. That is not based on law. things have to be based on law, and as Attorney General, I will enforce the law. When I was in college, I worked full-time to pay for school, and after law school, I worked hard to pay off my law school loans. Not everybody goes to college. Lots of people go straight into the workforce or start a business, go straight to work. This student loan forgiveness makes them pay for other people's debts.
Mrs. Byrd, thank you. Mr. Miller, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there to the claims about you only suing the Trump administration and not the Biden administration.
You know, I did sue the Trump administration for a while until the law was passed and I made the agreement with the governor. You know, I haven't been suing the Biden administration for a variety of reasons. Agreeing with them on the policy, agreeing with them on the law. On the student loan, student debt, they have some theories that they've advanced concerning the authority under a statute that gives them this kind of power. There's questions of whether it extends to this level, but that's fair enough.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you both. 3 companies are trying to build carbon capture pipelines throughout our state. They may have to use eminent domain to get all the land that they need for the project. What is your stance on the project, and what role, if any, does the state AG play in the legal fight both for or against these companies to potentially use eminent domain? Mrs. Byrd, that question to you, 60 seconds.
Yes, well, as I'm working across Iowa, I hear from a number of Iowans that are talking about the pipelines that are going through their counties. Some have decided to sign easements, others are waiting and seeing, and still others say they will never sign an easement. That is where the process is right now. The Utilities Board has a role to play in this, as does the legislature. At this point, it's not an issue that has come before the Attorney General's office.
If it were to come before the Attorney General's office, ma'am, quickly, how would you respond in the fight to use or not use eminent domain?
Well, it depends on what happens between now and then. There's a lot to happen between now and then. I think it's a little bit tough to predict just what steps the legislature is going to take when they come back in January, and we certainly don't know what the Utilities Board is going to do yet. So I'm not sure that I can answer that hypothetical question.
Understood. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Miller, same question to you. Your stance, what role, if any, does the state AG play in eminent domain, either for or against it for these carbon pipelines?
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult issue, and I struggle with it to some extent. On the one hand, it could be very, very important for farmers in terms of them selling to use to the ethanol plants. It would take care of some major parts of the carbon that ethanol plants produce, and give a longer life to these plants and a longer life to these enormous sales that farmers make to the plants. On the other hand, it's really unclear whether it's going to work. There's going to be a huge investment of our dollars, of federal dollars, to make this work. And I really understand the concerns of landowners, of farmers, as they go through this struggle. There's no direct policy making by the Attorney General's office, but we do make arguments and represent the consumers before the Utilities Board, which will make the decision whether to grant eminent domain.
Well, thank you both. Switching gears, Iowa's oldest residents are often targeted by scammers and are vulnerable to abuse and neglect. What's the role of the Attorney General's office in protecting our seniors? Mr. Miller, you have 60 seconds.
Well, that's consumer protection. Consumer protection is my baby in the Attorney General's office. I work so hard on this night and day, and think about how we can help consumers. And most of all, I'm concerned about elderly consumers. And there's just a whole series of scams against them because they are more vulnerable for a variety of reasons. And they do have more money than a lot of the population, so the scammers are driven towards them. And we constantly ask, how can we help elderly on fraud? And we've done sort of an incredible work in 2 areas, the sweepstakes and add-on charges. And we pursued those companies and pursued them, and as a result, those 2 industries do not come to Iowa because of our efforts and do not abuse adult Americans in our state. We're the only state that has that. In a lot of ways, our office is the top consumer protection division in the whole country. And that takes a lot of work on my behalf and our staff's behalf.
Mr. Miller, thank you. Mrs. Byrd, what is the role of the Iowa Attorney General's office in protecting Iowa's seniors?
Well, protecting seniors is very important, and anyone who's being scammed. The scams are everywhere, whether it's phone calls, emails, text messages, but they have a common thread. They are based on technology. When I'm Attorney General, we will update the Attorney General's office to make sure that we are keeping track of those cyber threats, both informing the public so that they understand and can help people avoid those threats, those frauds, whether it's mailing gift cards or taking out money and sending it under false pretenses and sending it sometimes to foreign countries. We will work with the DCI Cyber Lab to update the technology to make sure that they have the resources that they need to be investigating these threats, to bring people to justice where that's possible, but also making sure that we are preventing it in the first place.
Thank you, Mrs. Byrd. Domestic violence has taken the lives of 12 people in Iowa so far this year, according to the Domestic Violence Fatality Chronicle. What is the role Attorney General's office plays in preventing this type of violence, either at early stages or its final stage, unfortunately, as that statistic we just mentioned? Mrs. Byrd, question goes to you, 60 seconds.
Well, that kind of case where a domestic violence victim is murdered is one of the nightmare scenarios for a county attorney, for a prosecutor. That's the reason that we prosecute domestic violence cases. That's the reason I prosecute domestic violence cases. That's the reason we want to hold abusers accountable and get victims help, because those cases can turn deadly. Often I will see criminal defendants that go from one relationship to another with domestic abuse in each relationship. So I will bring that experience with me to the Attorney General's office. I'll bring that passion for holding people accountable, but also for working with victims and helping them heal and recover and become strong after going through all of that. I've seen that firsthand. And we will work with prosecutors around the state. Currently, I'm president-elect of the Iowa County Attorney Association, and we will work for the training and resources so that every county has the resources they need to bring people to justice.
Thank you, ma'am. Same question to you, Mr. Miller. The role that the AG's office plays in preventing domestic violence.
Well, our office plays a huge role in victims of crime, including domestic violence. Some time ago, the county attorneys decided that all the victims programs in the state should be united in one department, and that it should be the Attorney General's office, and convinced the legislature to do that. So we have a series of programs to help victims, including reimburse them for their financial losses in crime. But also we fund the domestic violence centers through federal money and state money, a very significant amount of money, so that they can do the effort of prevention. And those people that work in those programs are just real heroes. They don't make a lot of money, they believe in what they're doing, and they help the most vulnerable. We're also advocates in this area, have gone to the legislature, among other things, to try and finally successfully take away guns from people that have been involved in domestic violence. So that is one of the major parts of our office, and I think one of the successful parts of our office. And again, part of using the law to serve ordinary Iowans.
Thank you, sir.
Well, we now want to talk about a recent high-profile court case here in Des Moines. As part of a plea deal, teenage sex trafficking survivor Piper Lewis was sentenced to pay $150,000 restitution to the family of the man that she killed. That man had raped her repeatedly. Question for you both: should Piper Lewis have to pay that restitution? Mr. Miller, you go first, 60 seconds.
Yeah. You know, common sense and common justice tells us that she shouldn't have to pay. The law seems to be pretty clear that in all these situations, including hers, that she has to pay. So I think we have to continue to explore options to deal with that. And as soon as the legislature comes back, change the law so that this is not required, not mandatory, and make it retroactive to her situation.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mrs. Byrd, same question to you. Should Piper Lewis have to pay that restitution? You have 60 seconds.
Yes, I hear from concerns, people all over the state with that very same question that you are asking, wondering why the judge would order such a thing. And it's because the judge and the state as a prosecutor has to follow the law. The legislature makes the law, we follow it. So for those who wish to change it, it's important that they would talk to their legislators and ask them to change that law. That's where that change could happen. I think one of the reasons that law was passed was because it's very hard, and I would say impossible, to place any value on human life. But it could be that the legislature could look at exceptions so that something like this doesn't happen again.
All right, thank you, ma'am, for answering that question, and thank you, Mr. Miller, as well. Let's move on to what we're calling our lightning round. Please give us a quick answer to each one of these questions.
Our first question is, what is something about your opponent that you admire? Mr. Miller, you go first.
Well, actually two things. One, Brenna, you're intelligent. You're a very smart individual. And secondly, the working relationship that we had when you served in the governor's office. We'd run against each other, and we put partisan politics aside and worked in the interest of the state, which is always my approach.
Great. And Mrs. Byrd, one thing you admire about your opponent?
Well, it'll come as no surprise to Mr. Miller that I have that same thing that comes to mind. You are a nice guy and a good person, and I certainly appreciated our working relationship, which I think went really well when I was the governor's counsel in that role. And I commend you for that, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
And we had some ups and downs, but we worked through them. That was part of the success.
That's right. We worked through it.
All right, you talked about each other. Now talk about yourself. The proudest personal achievement for yourself. Mrs. Byrd, we start with you.
Well, I can't really call it an achievement per se, but I have to say I'm so blessed and thankful that I get to be a mom to a 6-year-old who's in kindergarten. That's probably one of the best things, if not the best thing, that's ever happened in my life.
Mr. Miller, same question to you. Proudest personal achievement.
We're stuck here, Brennan. We're given the same answers. It's being the father of my son, Matt Miller. He's been such a treasure, and I feel very blessed to have him.
Well, maybe you'll have different answers on this next question. What is your favorite place to visit in Iowa? Mrs. Byrd, start with you.
Oh, my favorite place to visit in Iowa is going to be my grandparents' house because my grandma is a great cook and sometimes has some treats or pie, and we can hang out there together, the whole family. My son and my husband love to spend time with Grandpa Wayne and Grandma Reenie, as my son calls them.
Mr. Miller, what about you?
Well, it's close, but number one is McGregor and Marquette and Effigy Mounds up where I lived before I became Attorney General. Just an absolutely beautiful place, and where the Wisconsin River comes into the Mississippi, for instance, the bluffs, the hills, just spectacular. And it's a state of mind for me. I can get away. But my hometown of Dubuque is a very close second, the record should show.
Okay, we appreciate you guys playing ball here on these lighthearted questions. It wouldn't be an Iowa debate without perhaps this question. The best tenderloin in the state of Iowa. Mr. Miller, the question goes to you.
Well, the best tenderloin, probably back in Dubuque at a number of restaurants that I've enjoyed there. I grew up in Dubuque, and it was just a great place to grow up in and have a lot of great memories, including the tenderloin.
Mrs. Byrd, same question to you.
Yes, well, everybody knows that I like to talk about Dexter, and in Dexter we have the Rusty Duck. It's a great restaurant. They have a fantastic tenderloin that is delicious, and you can probably only eat half of it. I recommend that you order it with the homies, which are a great kind of French fry. It goes great with a good tenderloin.
Well, thank you both. Now, before we go tonight, we're giving the candidates an opportunity to each make a closing statement. Each candidate will have 60 seconds, and we drew names out of a hat to determine speaking order. Brenna Byrd, will begin with you, your closing statement.
Thank you. Well, we've talked about a lot of things here today, but one thing we haven't heard is whether the Attorney General we have today has ever tried a criminal case before a jury himself, rather than just the other people in his office. We're still waiting for an answer to that question. When I'm Attorney General, I will work hard for you. I will work hard for justice. I've been an attorney for 21 years. I've been a prosecutor for 6 of those. When I'm Attorney General, we will back the blue. Law enforcement will know that they have my full support, and I will build that relationship with them all across Iowa. Iowans back the blue, and I do too. We'll have a cold case unit so that nobody gets away with murder. We'll have a special victims unit so we are focusing on some of the most heinous defendants and bringing those people to justice, the child molesters, those who would abuse the elderly. And I will hold the Biden administration accountable. I will bring them to court when they violate our laws and Constitution, unlike the current Attorney General who's retired on the job.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Miller, same question or same closing statement to you, 60 seconds.
I would just say that I haven't tried a jury case, a criminal jury case while I've been Attorney General, in part because I just have this incredible staff led by Scott Brown. They're among the best prosecutors in the state, protect the public night and day. Scott handled, of course, the Molly Tibbetts case. And one of his colleagues is working on the very difficult case in Fairfield where the teacher was murdered. I have argued a very significant case before the Iowa Supreme Court, and I've argued 2 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, and won both of them unanimously. So that's my court appearance. I just love this job, and people know that because you get to use the law to serve the interest of ordinary Iowans. I love it because we have this great staff. We've succeeded in doing so many things to serve Iowans in everyday life, and that's been our emphasis. How do we help in consumer? How do we prosecute those cases? What do we do about the opioid crisis? How do we help farmers with the fertilizer situation? That is what our office is about, including the independence, the enormously important independence of this office.
Thank you, sir, and thank you both for joining us this afternoon and evening for the Iowa Attorney General and for taking part in our questioning, both Brenna Bird and Tom Miller.
Thank you both. And at home, if you missed any of tonight's debate, you can watch it online at kcci.com or streaming on our very local app.
Thank you for watching. Have a great Sunday afternoon and evening. This has been a Commitment 2022 special debate for the Iowa Attorney General.